Hey, this is Red from Ross Video. I'm part of the expression team there, and I'll be taking you through transition logic and how to get started. So, if you should have the project, you should have expression 9 I'll be using today, and you should hopefully have opened it, and you should be at this stage looking at your transition logic training project. Now, within that, you're going to find a number of scenes. These are labeled as such. You've got complete, which, as you might guess, is the complete project. There's also one that's called flag, which is going to interact with that. Then I have broken it down, and we're actually going to work down from the kind of most incomplete up to the stage where you actually make your own complete version. So we'll actually be starting here. But I want to show you, first of all, what the end goal is. So we're going to make a project that does this. So we're going to start with, you'll be able to bring on your complete scene. You see it animates on. I can take it offline, take it online. I can then go to another scene with different content. And you can see here they animate. If I were to, let's say, duplicate this item, and let's just change transition logic. And what we should find now is if I change this one, it's just going to change one of the items, you see? So there's logic in there that's changing both, changing one. And then we also have the option of bringing this flag on and off. And if I were to actually take this offline, you'll see now the flag actually comes down in a different location. And then I bring on this and it moves up out the way. If I take this offline, it pops back down and I can take this down. So I can play any of these scenes in any order. So I can take this one online, then I can take this online, then this guy, then I can take this one online and take off and off. So I could do that any which way, and the logic that I've built into the scene will control how that looks. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our design side and we're going to grab this first one called no animation and we're going to start there. So we need to build our animations before we can do our logic. So you're going to want to start by making some scene directors because one isn't enough in this case. I'm going to add 2 for now. In this case you can follow me, but I do recommend you actually plan out your transition logic when you're doing your own projects. Generally I find there's more options than I expect. The first thing I'm going to do is right click on this end one and make this the new default. You'll see how the bold moves down, and then I'm going to make it called null. And why is it called null? It could be called empty null. You can call it what you want. For me, it's called null. Basically, it does nothing. And the reason for this is Expression always tries to play the default scene director. So when you've got logic as well, telling it to play something else, you can end up with some conflicts, and it doesn't look great. So let's go with that. And we're going to start with this guy, and we're going to call this scene director 1 in. And we're going to start by animating our mask. So the mask is going to animate first. It's going to animate on Y. It's already in its end position, so let's actually start it in its end position. And it needs to start at the beginning, obviously. And so we're going to move it up so that it covers up our... Don't worry about the text for now. We're going to worry about that later. And don't worry about that orange object either. Okay, so let's do a Control K on Y there, making sure you've got the mask selected here. I am moving quite quickly during over the animation stages because I'm taking it as read that people have done animating before. If it is a bit too quick for you, then there's our animation courses on the Expression U. You can check those out. I'm going to close that now by pressing enter. And we've got a basic animation now, right? Now I'm going to move to the end again. I'm going to move that BG2 is that orange object. I'm going to make a keyframe on that. And I'm going to start that from, let's say, 4. And let's move the starts in the same place. There we go. And now what happens if we play those together, we get a little orange line, and eventually the mask catches up, so it gets thinner as it moves. So just a little bit more interesting than a hard edge. And that's going to be our in animation. So I'm going to rename this guy as in and out. And I'm going to trim that down to 20 in here. 20. There we go. So what are we going to do about this text then? Well, I'm going to make another animation controller. And this one is going to be the text in. So probably start that guy down here. We can always adjust it later. That's the upside of using multiple animation controllers rather than building everything in one. And I'm going to call this text in. Very good. Okay. And we need to go and find our text position group. And at the moment it's in its end position again. We'll make the text come in a bit quicker. Let's go with 15. And we will make a keyframe. This time we're going to do it on X instead of on Y. And I'm doing the group so they both come in together. Set and close. Take that back to the beginning. And then we're going to take that group so it disappears behind this left edge mask there. You can do it by eye or take this number here if you want to copy that. And we do a keyframe again. And so now we should have a roll in. There we go. Excellent. And if you want to finesse some of your graphics, obviously, I'm not going to spend ages doing my own curves when I think. If you want to learn, once again, that's an expression you. So obviously you can do your own curves with these guys. In the name of saving time, I'm just going to do a simple Bezier on everything. So, and this is also quite good when you're doing things forward and backwards because it's going to have the same timing in each direction. So let's click both of these on. Just an extra note. What you can do is, let's just do this one first. There we go. What you can do, if you know you're going to use a particular type of transition a lot, if you go to Preferences under Edit, and under the editor, you can actually change a bunch of defaults. So you can see here I've got mine set to 50 instead of 200. But if you knew you were going to be doing simple Bezier on everything, or you know you're going to do your own interpolation on everything, then you can choose your preference. So in this case, I'm just going to do simple Bezier. So all my animations will be that by default. And now, okay, looking good. Again, this guy's a bit long, so let's trim that down. It's important with transition logic to try and keep your animations down to the length that they really are, because even if you had a whole load of empty keyframes, Expression still reads that as being an animation. So what you'd see is that you're in a transitioning stage for much longer than you might want to be. Okay, so in Scene Director 2, let's rename this guy and call it out. We're going to open this up and let's take our animation controller and take this text. And we're going to reverse it. And then we're going to take the in and out. And we're going to reverse that too. There we go. So I've just sped it up slightly by having overlapped. Quite often outs are faster than ins. So if you wanted to, I haven't actually done this in my the scenes I've made as examples, but I just want to show you how you could actually reuse the same animations. But if you do want a faster out, you can actually put a little event here, and you could say change speed to say 2, and now your out would be the same style, but it would be faster. So I'm just going to delete that because that's not how I built the rest, but I just wanted to show you it as a little bonus. Okay, so now we've got our in and out. The next thing is to build our different conditions. Okay, so now we need to animate our text. So we need to add another scene director, which I've already done. And we're going to call this both text in. And we're going to edit this guy, and we're going to need a new animation controller for this guy. So we do animation controller there, and we're going to rename it as upper text. Okay, and this one is going to animate our upper text. I'm actually going to build the out animation and then reverse this, so will make sense, I think. If you do a Control K, making sure you actually select your text first. So let's go find that. It's down here. Text position, title. So with text title clicked, Control K, position Y, set and close. Let's say this can be the out position. Go away, thank you. Windows just getting in the way there. So let's move you up, and made a keyframe there, and okay, that looks alright. Let's trim that down, so down to there, and we're actually going to reverse that. There we go. So we got an in, and then we are going to add another animation controller. There we go, and we're going to rename you lower text. And you probably guess what I'm going to do. We're going to take the subtitle. We're going to go back to the beginning there, make a keyframe, get down to that lower one there, get them off the screen. I'm just eyeballing it this in this case, just for the purpose of getting this done. And there we go. And once again, we're going to trim this guy down, and we're going to reverse it. Okay, cool. Now we should close this guy, and we're going to actually duplicate it. And if we undo our reverse, we now have our out, assuming you actually called it that, which I did not. I left mine as the default, so let's rename that as out. We're going to have a timing issue with our in and out animations. So the way that transition logic works, it plays the out and the in at the same time, unless you choose an option to wait. In this case, we're going to do the timing ourselves. So what I want you to do is on the in animation, I want you to pick it up, and we're going to move it down to 12. So you can do it how I just did then, picking it up, or you can actually right click and say move to position, and you can type in 12. Obviously that's a bit easier. Cool, so that is our both text in done. So what's next? Well, we can use those to make the rest of our animations. So rather than building everything from scratch, if I now duplicate this in twice, I'm going to close them quickly while I rename. And this one is going to be called upper text in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete the one I don't want. And then the same for the next one. I'll rename this one as lower text in. Open them up and get rid of that upper one. As you can see now, because I made them as separate animation controllers, we're looking good. We've only got the one animating, which is exactly what we wanted. And of course, we need to do the same for the out. So get this guy, duplicate, and duplicate. And let's make this one lower text out. Yep, I know what I'm doing, honest. There we go. So we've got the out, and then we'll do the upper text out. There we go. Looking good. I just need to rename that quickly. Lower text out. Oops, that was actually the upper text. I was just testing there. And then this guy should just be the lower. There we go. And you now have your in, your out, both in, out, upper, and lower. So you can see there we end up with 9, and that's just to do that. Hopefully you followed that, and now we're going to, next bit, we're going to look at how to take all those animations and use them with transition logic. Okay, so now we have our animations, and they are ready to go. So we've got various in and out animations, both ins, etc. And so now we're going to need to build our logic. So I want you to go to the no logic scene so that we can all start together. Just leaving your no animation scene wherever you got to. And you're going to click on the scene object inside your object manager. And then you're going to click on your object inspector on the second tab. So let's add a new rule. So that's this button here. And once we've done that, you can you'll have a new rule that's untitled. You'll if you click on that for a moment, it will highlight, and we can rename that as in and out. That's just for your notes. You can actually name that anything you wish. And then we're going to look at this first tab over here. So just bringing attention to that. We actually have 3 tabs here, and we're going to be focused on this first one, in and out. These here are actually drop-down menus. So if you click on the side over here, you're going to see a selection of all your different in and out, well, all your scene directors. In this case, I'm going to choose in, and I'm going to choose out. Okay, so we have our first rule done. So we should have a look at what that does. If you take your no logic scene and you drag it in, you play it, you'll see it plays in, and if I click take offline, it goes off, in, off, etc. Anyone who's used expression without transition logic knows that you normally use one scene director and you have a pause and you take and take again. So this can be a bit confusing for operators who are new to expression. So this makes it work in a way that they might expect. And I would say if you're going to use transition logic on all your, on some of your scenes, I would build it for all your scenes to work in that way, rather than having a mix of different methods. So make it more consistent. Now we're going to look at what happens if you don't have other rules. So I'm going to take on this scene, which is the no logic scene, and I take on another one of the same scene, and you can see it goes off and it comes on, and we don't want that to happen. We want it to behave like the complete scene where just the text animates. So let's look how we add some of those extra rules to get to that stage. So going back to layout, we're going to add a new rule, and this rule is going to be called both in. And this rule is going to have some conditions that, if true, it's actually going to play a back-to-back animation. So if we go over here to the second tab called back-to-back, and what back-to-back means is if this scene is playing again next to itself. So this is how you get a page update type of animation. So let's see, in here we have our both text in and our both text out. However, this expression doesn't yet know when it should be playing this, so we need to tell it. And if we right click on the rule, we can add a condition. And if we do a add condition, back-to-back condition, in this case we're going to compare the text objects. And I've added one, and that one is going to be, is the title different? So you can see here I've got two options. Is it different? Is it the same? And then if we add another rule, or other condition, sorry, and this one is going to be the subtitle, and is that one also different? And that's going to be the first condition. So if we now play, those two that I have before here are actually both the same. So it's actually not going to work again. You see how it doesn't change. However, if I now change what this second one has content-wise, so let's say, there we go. Let's play this first one in, and the second one, and now we have our animation. Don't worry about the issues with the mask. We're going to look at that later. Cool. So we have our first rule with conditions. So let's have a look. Let's take this one, and we're going to add a condition, back-to-back condition. In fact, what we can do is if you right-click and you duplicate, and then we're going to say no change. And this is to help expression know exactly what to do, because if you do not specify every possibility, sometimes you may see unexpected behavior. So you do need to also tell it expression what to do when the other rules are not true. So if the more specific you are, the more success you have. So I'm going to say what to do if both of these are the same. And in this case, we don't want it to play any animation at all, so we can actually make use of that null. If you want to, you could play an animation even when there's no change. It's totally up to you. In this case, I'm going to use the null object, so follow along with me for now. And that means that if stuff is the same, it won't do anything. So if you accidentally take the same content to where twice, so we're going to do that now. So if I duplicate this one, what we'll see now is the first time it changes, and if I take this one, it doesn't do anything, you see. So that's probably what you want, because normally if you're going to take the same thing to air twice, it's probably a mistake. So now we're going to make the upper and lowers. I'm going to do a duplicate again. We're going to say upper text, and I'm going to say title is different. So you see here it's just the title, and you can actually see it updated here. So check if title is different, check if subtitle is the same. Now we need to go and tell it which animations to play. So I'm back on the back-to-back tab. I'm going to change the first one to be upper text in, upper text out. So the last rule we need to add is the opposite or inverted version of this rule. So if we duplicate this rule, and what we need to do is change our conditions. So we can either click invert, or you can just click the radio buttons. Just want them the opposite way around to what they were. So now we have is title the same and subtitle different. And of course we need to choose some different animations that happen when we do that. So we want the lower text in, and we want the lower text out. We're going to rename this. It will still work without the naming, but this is so in a year's time when you come back and try and figure out what you're doing, you know. So we should have now a fully working lower third. We can play the first one like we did before. We get our change. Let's duplicate this guy. play that one, and we should just get the top change. As I said before, don't worry about this masking issue. We're going to learn that in the next section, how to deal with that. And then we're going to duplicate this guy, and we will change the lower level. So it's going red because I've put a soft limit and a hard limit on this text, which you can see in expression U videos. And I'm going to play that. And now we have a fully working back-to-back logic scene, with the exception of those masks, which come back in a minute, and we will look at how to fix those. So in this section, we're going to look at how to fix the mask issue I was talking about at the end of the previous section. So what I want you to do is start with the no mask fix, which should now be the same as your no logic scene, as you've now taken your no logic scene to this, but I would like everyone to start on the same scene, so everyone starts on the same place with the no mask fix. So if you drag your no mask fix twice over to the sequence and just change the second one's content to whatever you like, just as long that's different, and you'll see we now have the in, the change, but with the issue here that I was talking about. So let's go over here to the layout side and see how we fix that. So I have a method that I like to use to fix it. It's not the only method. Just to let you understand why it happens, it's not a mistake. If you go to your back-to-back, any of your back-to-back animations, so that tab here, you'll see here there is a checkbox that says render animated objects only. If you uncheck that, when you do your back-to-back, Expression will re-render everything. Now, just to show you the problem with that is, if I click that off and I trigger that, what you'll see is we now get a jump between the two scenes. So if I play this guy, now I'm going to play this, you see how we don't get the nice smooth animation. So it does fix the mask, but we now have a jump instead. So we actually do want that checkbox on to avoid that behavior. So we're going to go back, I'm going to turn that back on, and we're going to fix it another way. So the way to do it is to trick Expression into thinking the masks are animated, and this works very well. So we go to the back-to-back in animation here, and I'm going to make a new animation controller. What you can do is you can put these into the animation controllers you've already got. My preference is to do it as its own individual animation controller, and I'm going to call this mask fix. And the reason for that is you'll see once I've finished doing this. So I'm going to go to the first frame of this. I'm going to find my masks, which I know where they are. They're somewhere here. So there's a group called mask group. You've got your mask top, that's this one, and your mask bottom, that's this one. So if we click on both, so if you click your first one and control click the second one, and if you press Control K, or you can press the key button down here and turn off everything. And I tend to choose something that this mask isn't going to be animated on. So I know I'm not going to ever rotate this mask on, say, Z. So I'm going to click that, and you see I have both of these selected, and I have in here all selected. So it's going to make a key on 0 in this guy for that. And I'm going to do set and close. I don't need it this long. I'm going to trim that down to 20, just so I've got something to grab it by. and what you should find is that will now make a difference on our both text in. So let's go have a look. We're still going to see a slight issue. So if we go, we saw that animate over there. And so now what we want is on the out, because what you're seeing is as that text rises up, we're seeing that issue. So if we go to our text out, we don't need to do this again. Oops. Let's try doing the correct one. So both text out, please. There we go. And from our animation controllers, if you grab the mask fix, drag it over here, and actually let's make that only 10. Otherwise, the problem is I'm actually extending the length of this animation. So let's take that down to 10. And the other one will be trimmed down as well because they're actually the same animation controller. And if we now go to our sequencer, sorry about the jumping backwards and forth, but it's the only way to really show this. We should now have a nice, there we go. That looks a lot better. So the problem we're now going to have is if we duplicate the lower guy and we just change one item, so go to this and we're still going to face the mask issue. Oh dear. How do we fix that? Well, we just go and put that animation controller into all of our other back-to-back animations. So you can see now why I made that as a separate animation controller. So let's go grab the mask fix, drop him in here. Let's try again on that. I missed apparently. There we go. And I can use a shift click to get that at the front there. Shift brings on the snapping. And then let's close this guy, open the next one. And then you just repeat. So I'll open this guy, get that animation controller, drop him on the front there. I'm putting them all on the same track, they don't have to be. There we go. It just makes it easier to unpick when you come back later if you stick to a method. Okay, now what we should find is all of our masks should be working. Just need to check that one other one, so let's duplicate this guy. And that's our top one working now. Excellent. So hopefully that works for everyone. And obviously if it doesn't, review it and try again. Okay, in this section I'm going to show you how to animate the flag section of the graphics. So let's see, I have actually made a scene called flag partial. So if you can start on that, then you'll be following along on the same as me. I've made for you the in and out sections of the flag. So we don't need to build those. What we do need to do though is add ourselves a new scene director. I'm going to rename this called move. I'm then going to add a animation controller also called move, but in lowercase. I'm going to trim it down to 15, and then we're going to animate it. And to make sure we get it in the right position, I'm actually going to double click the scene here, and that's going to put it on the frame buffer. I'm actually then going to double click this scene, the one we're working on, so I'm back on that, and it's also going to be on air because I put the take layer as -1. It's on air, but it's just behind there. Now animating this, I'm going to do Control K. Obviously we need to uncheck those. Actually, I've made a mistake. I didn't click the scene group, so don't do that. Let's try again. let's do a position Y only, and we're going to set that where it is. So I can press enter. Then you can either move this guy down to the end, or you can type it in manually. I'm going to move this guy down here. Control K. Actually, we want to move it first, so let's try that. So watching the virtual output here, let's move this guy. We're going to move it to 540 if you want to copy my values, or you can eyeball it yourself depending on your preference, but 540 will actually make it sit directly on the top there. I'm going to make a new keyframe at 15, set and close. And if you want to finesse that a bit, you can open up the key graph editor and you can go to the position. I'm just going to stick a simple Bezier on that rather than doing my own finessing, but if you wish to do your own, please do. And now it's going to pop up. So that bit's pretty easy. We don't need to make the reverse because we're just going to play it backwards when we want the reverse using the scene triggers, so you'll get to see that. So let's get rid of this guy, clear those frame buffers. What we do need to do though is add another scene director, and this one's going to be called, in fact, let's not make a new one. Let's make a duplicate to save ourselves a little bit of time. So if you go to the in, and if you right click and do duplicate, you'll already have a copy of your in animation. And then what we can do is we can take the move that we already have, and we just want that last keyframe actually. So we can move it back here, and we're actually gonna, you can actually slide your animation controllers off this back end here, and we can just use that last keyframe you want. If you want to, you can make yourself a different animation controller that puts it in different Y positions, which you might do if you were maybe had even more locations that it could come on in. In this case, I like to reuse as much as I can. It's more efficient. So now we have it coming on in the upper position. If you want to test that, you can put that both back on air again. You can see it's there, and we can actually see that working. Very good. Now, what I also want to be able to do is bring it on in a lower position. So I need to go and actually make a change to my original in. I'm just going to use this moment to rename that one as upper in. And then I'm going to open up my original in. And we're going to take the same one, the move. This time, however, I'm going to do a reverse. And just as before, I should say, I'm going to slide this guy off the end here. Again, it's reusing our own work, and you can see now I have it in the lower position. So now we have a lower in and an upper in. So the default's going to be when the flag comes in on its own, it's going to be in the lower position, and when the flag comes in the upper position is when the lower third is already on air. Okie dokie. So how do we do that? We go to our flag at the top of our object manager. We go to the flag partial animation, transition logic tab, and we're going to add a rule. We're going to be working in the first tab this time, the in and out, and we're going to need to choose some of our scene directors. So we're going to start with upper in. I'm going to choose the standard out, and we're going to choose the standard in and the standard out. Right, the reason why we can use the same out for both is there's actually no Y information in the out animation, which means it will animate out on whichever position it's in, so we don't need to worry about that. We now need to add a condition, which is going to be a check scene layer. So we're going to need the name of the scene to check for. So we're actually going to check for the complete scene. And so if you want to, an easy way to do this is rename, copy, go back to the scene you're working on, back to your condition and paste. And this is going to check it on any layer. So if that a scene called complete is online anywhere, this rule is true. You can see here we have a number of other ways of constraining that, but in this case that's enough. So if it's true, it's going to play the upper in, and if it's false, it's going to play the lower in. And if we want to check that, what we can do is we can go over here. You can take your flag partial and you can bring it on air, bring it off air, bring this guy on air and put it on, and there you go. So what problem do we have left? Well, if we bring the flag on and we bring this guy on, the flag didn't know to move, and we're going to cover that in the next section. Okay, so we want to build our triggers to trigger the flag based on if this scene's on air or not. So what we need to do is we need to go to our in animation, and at the beginning of the in animation, so when it's off air, right click, and we're going to add ourselves a scene director trigger. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say trigger the flag animation. So that's going to be called flag, and the animation is going to be called move. If you named it anything different, make sure you check because it is sensitive to the naming. And we're going to click OK, and we're going to say copy. And the reason for that is if we go to the out animation and we bring this guy in and we do paste. If you open the properties of that now or double click, these are already filled in, so we can just say play in reverse. And to test that, what we now do is if we close that, if you have your flag scene, that's the one we're triggering, put it on air, take your no flag trigger scene and play it on air, then what's going to happen now is if I take it on air, it's going to move up, take it off air, move down, and if you want to tweak the timing, you just have to move where those triggers are. So the one last problem we're going to have now is if you try and play, say you take your flag off, it works okay now, and I bring it on, it's actually come in a lower location. And what's the reason for that is? It's because when we built our logic into the flag and the partial flag, we referenced the term complete. So if you want to see everything working together now, if you grab your complete scene instead, if you take your flag, bring on this guy, bring on this guy, take this guy off. You see it moves down, take it off, bring it on, and do anything you want to do with it in any order, and you should find that you're good. So in this section, I'm going to show you some best practices for where to put your default frame marker, followed by how to do your preview frame marker for various workflows for expression. So we'll start with the default frame marker, and for that, to explain what they're for, it's when you have your, say, various animations for transition logic. Obviously, when the rule is true or false depends heavily on which scene directors will play. So you'll have a number of scene directors that actually are static. And at that point, if they are, for example, here, what you may find is during your transition, you may have a problem where your background or your text disappears, or it might go to the wrong position. So to deal with that, what you can do is you can force the scene director to be in a specific place when it's not playing. So that would be and I'm right clicking on the time here. I'm going to markers, default frame, and set. and if I don't get that in quite the right place, I can just redo it and set it there. So that is the default markers. I recommend using them sparingly at first. If you put them everywhere, then you will actually have conflicts and you may not be able to tell what is causing what issue. So I generally start with none and add them in where needed. As a general rule, putting them on your ins is generally a safe bet at the end. So I'm going to just do that in this case to make sure those are all in the right places. So let's just go through. There we go. So those are our default markers all set. So let's have a look how those look. So you should see same behavior as we had before. So and if we play, we get our correct behaving back-to-back logic. Okay. So now we've placed all of our default frame markers, we're going to look at preview frame markers. They are for a different function. These are for controlling your thumbnails you see as a preview here in your MOS and your NLE. And also, quite importantly, what you see when you are working as an operator on the sequence side. As you can see here, this is my preview, which I can play through, but the holding frame is where I choose my preview frame. And these are the reason why these are key is because they are actually interactive, and I can then just type directly into them rather than having to look down the side, which here I've only got two, so it doesn't matter too much, but you can imagine in quite a complex scene it's quite nice just to be able to click and go directly to the field you wish to edit. So how do we place those? Well, there's two ways. Number one is go to the animation in your scene directors that you want to. So I'm going to play this through, for example. We get to the end and we can right click and place a preview frame marker at that location. Just to show you what happens if I put it in a bad place. Preview, set. Now we've only got a thin line which matches this. And if we go back to the end of our animation, we're going to get that right there. Set a preview on the end, and this is going to update. If you find your thumbnail doesn't update, you can actually regenerate all thumbnails by right-clicking and saying yes please. And then you'll find you have a nice preview, just like we saw before, on here. Excellent. And if you're wondering, oh, well, my thumbnail was fine anyway, as you can see, these do not have the preview. It's because that's where I left the last animation. What that preview does is overrides that. So if someone goes into the layout side and leaves it in a mid-animation state or the beginning of an animation, say I leave this scene in layout like this, it means that my thumbnail doesn't move to where that playhead is. It leaves it at the good place where everything's in view. So, final stage is I'm going to add a little extra bit on the end here about NLE workflow and how to make your scene director for that. So if I take my in animation, I'm going to duplicate this, and I've now got a copy of my in, and I'm now going to take my out animation because I want to make a symmetrical version of my in and my out and put them all back into one timeline. For those of you that are used of the non-transition logic way, this is probably going to be fairly standard, but I'm just going to explain why I'm doing it. First of all, I'm going to get rid of this trigger, so I don't need that for the NLE. And then I'm going to get a copy of the text in animation controller from my animation controllers list, and the L3 in. I'm just going to make it overlap just the same as the in does, and of course it's important that we reverse those. And now we're going to end up with, I'm just going to close this down so you can actually see what I'm doing. We end up with a very quick in and an out. And if you wanted to, you could place your your preview frame marker in the middle there is actually going to look much the same as the where it is at the moment, but we'll do it anyway. Preview frame, set and close. And when it, even though this is very fast, when it gets placed into the NLE, it will take the middle frame of your animation and stretch it out. So it's important to make sure you have a symmetrical animation. Now, some of those of you who've been using the newer versions of Expression will know that we actually have a more advanced version of this now, using center frames, in and out sections. If you want to know more about that, there's actually a dedicated video on the Expression U showing just how that works in a lot more detail than I've just gone into now. So you can go and check that out. Thanks for watching. That's been transition logic and some extra skills at the end there, just about markers and good practices. Thanks very much.
Okay, so that was all pretty quick. Lots of information there. I don't know why my camera's so blurry. There was a lot of information in there. We've got a lot of good questions. I'm going to go back up towards the top of the list here and throw these questions out to Simon, who we should be able to hear as well. First question we got here is, can you dynamically script a keyframe value? I'm going to disappear off the screen here, and I'm going to let Simon show that to you. So just 1 second.
Hi. So I didn't have a moment to just put anything together, but I did quickly grab an example of a script. But we can, we did have after this morning's session some people asking about a scripting session, so we're going to put one of those together. Obviously, if you had a chance to vote in the poll at the beginning, then thanks for that. And I'll just quickly show you. You can absolutely move keyframe. Oops. Thanks, thanks Windows. I didn't need your help there. It's trying to help, but I wish it wouldn't. So what we have here is our script. So you can either move keyframes that already exist, or in this case, you can make them. So in this script, it was designed for football to move the ball. So there's some conversion in here for yards. And so basically it shows how far the ball moved. So what we have here is our animation controller, our marker, which is an object. And so in the scene, we go and get the animation controller by name and call it, let the script know that it's an animation controller. We go and find an object, which is in this case our marker, which is the one we're moving via data. Then what we actually do first of all is clear all the current keyframes. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of keyframes, and then you end up with a whole host of mess. So either move ones you got, or if you're gonna set yourself new ones, I recommend clearing your old ones. And we set our frame. This is the playhead to 0. Then what we do here is we say the marker first position, position X is the marker position, and then here is actually sorry about that. So here is actually the interpolation. So what we've done here is we've set a keyframe value TCB. So if you remember, when you look at your key graph editor, when you make a keyframe, you have some different options. If you have a keyframe, let's go here quickly. So we have a keyframe, and obviously when you can set no interpolation, or in this case TCB, and actually those 3 values are these in that order. So tension, continuity, and bias. So we go back here, open this guy back up. So that would be tension, continuity, and bias. And then we set our second keyframe is actually at position 120. And based on position X again of the marker, this time a calculation. So that's where the dynamic part of this comes in. So this one in this case plays a certain amount of time, always 0 to 120, but the values are what's changing of where this object's x is. So it goes from start position to a calculation of that. And then we tell it to play from 0 to 120. Obviously, all these values are what you can change. So if you wanted to be able to put a keyframe and a different marker, so if you wanted to start at say 25 and go to 600, that's what you would change here. And so yeah, you have, obviously you can change the values in that order. So obviously any values you don't write in here don't get changed. Simple as that. So if you wanted to change more, if you wanted on this 0 to change the y as well, you'd also put that value in as well and change that. So I hope that that helps, and I'll request that that gets added into the script webinar.
Great. Thank you, Simon. Next question. Somebody's asking about expression 9 versus other versions. Expression 9 now allows multiple conditions in a rule? Question. Previously, if you had multiple conditions, it would ignore additional conditions if a rule in the first one was true. So this brings up two questions because there's a follow-up question which says, how do you know which order the rules run in? So multiple conditions, and how do you tell it which one to run? How does it know which one to run?
Okay. Someone's trying to call me, so sorry about that. Sorry about that, guys. And now I can't get rid of that because it's, there we go. Right. So what we need to look at first of all is transition logic rules. Is the order they play is top to bottom. However, to answer the other thing, I would say try to make your rules precise enough that it doesn't matter, because you can still get conflicts. So I would, for example, in this case, you could, for these, for example, where is it? The lower and upper, which I've neglected to name, so I'm sorry for that. I'll try to update the project. You could just have something that says has the title text changed, and you could neglect the second one. The problem is you may run into an issue where two rules could be true, and then you may find that you have conflict. So it's always better to be as precise as possible with every rule. So for example, it is time consuming, but it's worth it. If you have, say, 5 bullets in an image, you would want to make rules for the different circumstances of whether you update those 5 pieces of text either individually, together, line 1, line 2, or the image on its own, or the title on its own. Obviously, it means you end up with a lot of rules, but you need to have rules depending on the number of different animations you're going to make. Probably with the bullets, for example, you might just say, well, if anything's changed on the bullets, I want them all to change. So you'd only need the one rule for that that group. But like I say, it's better to be as precise as possible, and then you won't run into conflicts between your different rules then. Regarding the multiple conditions, I'm pretty certain that's been available since we introduced transition logic in 6. I could be wrong, but I'm almost certain that's always been possible to have multiple rules and conditions within those rules.
Okay, now another great question. We chose to do this in version 9 because we knew that some people might not have newer licenses for dongles or software access or things like that. The question comes up, with expression 9.5 now released, were there any changes to transition logic features in that version update?
Oh God, off the top of my head. There was some improvements, I think. I can't remember. Was there features added, Patrick? I'm sorry, I actually can't remember.
I think there was some tweaking in scene triggers, but I'm sure the developers are right now cursing me out for not knowing this off the top of my head.
Yeah, me too, probably. I know there were some fixes between 8 and 9, but I can't remember about 9 to 9.5, I'm afraid.
Okay, let me go get another one here. Somebody's asking the difference between default and preview frame markers, and I think you showed pretty much that the preview frame marker is what draws your thumbnails, and the default frame is generally a match keyframe where you cut from your in transition to the default because they run concurrently, correct?
Right, so your preview is what generates this thumbnail, your mask enely, and also, most importantly, of course, over here, your thumbnail here. That's your preview one. There we go. Which is important for interaction like this, and then so the other one is, so you have here your preview, which is what I was just talking about, which is the thumbnail down here. So your main one, if I were to go to take item here, you can actually change it here too. So I could say my in, I can actually set the preview here. And if I set it in a bad place, let's say here, you should see actually this will update. So, and you can actually see it changing down here too. So you can actually manually write in a location for that. Your default frame markers are very important when working with transition logic because they are where your playhead is in that scene director when it's not doing anything. So if you have a rule that's playing your in and out lowers, it's where the default is for your playhead in, say, the main in. And if your default frame location is here, what you might find is your text will animate and your background behind that text will disappear somewhere during the transition. So it's important to set that default frame marker. Hope that helps.
Yep. Okay, there are several people asking the same question here. How do you export a take item to a video for transition logic? And I believe you want to go into setting up your hardware and making an AVI recorder, correct?
You can also just do this, which is if I go to say complete and I say export to video, then I can here, if you have transition logic, you can have a set duration and you can have a render out duration, so transition. So it will play your in, render for however many frames you choose here, and then it will actually play the out at the end here. And you can choose between what containers you have installed, and within those containers you can choose which codecs you have installed. And then once you're happy, let's just choose one off the top of the head here. Yeah, that'll do. And then you can just export to a video. I'm going to abort that because that might take a little while. Okay.
Okay.
Unless you want me to render one and play it. But it
Nah,
does work.
that's okay. They can all do this on their own. Is it possible to use videos as a lower third with transition logic?
It is. I'm going to do a different session on that. It's very similar, but it does take a little bit of thought. Either you do the thought when you make your videos and cut them up, but I'm actually going to do a video on if you do get provided with a video that has it's all in one video, plays in and plays out on one, and how you can treat that to actually get it working for you. But I'm going to do that separately.
Okay. We already talked about the default marker. Okay. I was too busy watching. Could you explain conditions using scene numbers? I have tried and have never had success. Does that make sense to you?
I'm going to take a guess that do you mean this condition here, scene name?
I think they mean scene ID.
This one here.
Probably, yes.
So you can be much more specific with a rule. So if you could say, well, a better example might actually, if I go to the flag, for example, you might want on the in out, I use a similar rule for the in out here, which is the scene complete on air. It's only the same as using the name, but you can just use the scene ID number instead, which would be 17.
Right.
So you check for, is that scene ID on air? If it is, then based on that, if it's true, play this method. If it's false, play this method. So it's
Okay.
just that basically.
Yeah. And also, since you pointed this out with the flag, I believe that you can use the scene name as a wildcard. So you could have anything that starts with flag.
That is true, yes. So things like all, for example. So if you say all your scenes that you want, let's say you have a lower third and you want it to come in on a lower position when your full screens are on air, you could have all your full screens could be called FS star and or asterisk depending on what you call it. But if you put in there, say FS star, you could say if this rule is true, then come in on the lower position, and that would be true if any full screen graphic was on air. So
Okay.
yeah, wildcards work.
Here's another one for you. Do all animation controllers act independently from what you copied and reversed, or do they all correspond to the parent controller? So if you change the original, all of the copies change as well?
It's important to differentiate between copies and instances.
Right.
That's the key thing. So if I go here and I make a copy, i.e. right click copy or control C, and I paste, that is, just to go over pasting as well, you have some pasting options too. When you paste, you can either have your new one linked to the same objects, or this is actually a drop down and you can copy your animations to a new object. But I don't want to get too sidetracked, so just for now we're going to copy to the same objects. This, if we rename this, you'll see this has actually incremented the name. This is a copy. I can change the animation of this copy. So if we go to the properties, I can change the values of the position X here to, let's say 0. Let's go down even more. So we can change that animation. And if I now go to the original, then you'll see it's still in that original position. If I take an instance, i.e. going to the animation controller and copying and pasting that original, and I change that now, then going back, is actually you can see here they're both yellow because they're actually the same, actually technically the same one, and that's the same even if I go to the out and I go and change it here, you can see it was linked. So it's important to know that if you copy and paste, you are making a new animation controller. If you drag from here over, you're making an instance of it. So it's still linked. Hope that makes sense.
I think it does.
Cool.
Okay. The question here, is there any good resources to research, watch, or read about scripting before that webinar is available? Yes, there is on Expression U. Under the intermediate section, I believe there is a script video that was made by one of our engineers on the software product, and he does explain it, but he is using Visual Basic to show it. I think it's VB. He's showing that off so you can kind of get an idea for it. Next question is, I have flags that are part of the same scene instead of building it on a separate scene. Is there a way to have a keyboard shortcut that triggers a specific scene director? For example, a keyboard shortcut to expand and retract a flag within a scene that is already on air. That
Yeah,
makes sense to you?
you would do that, yes. You would do that from here. So edit keyboard mapping, and you would from here you can add anything from the expression menu or UI that you wish, including you can add a script. And in here you would write a script that called the scene. I think you probably have to get the frame buffer as well. Let's try to remember what this is called. And then you'd also need to get the scene director. And then you write the rest of your script, and then at the end you would you just tell it to play. I can add that to the that can be added as a request to the scripting webinar if you want, rather than me going to do it now. I mean, I can write it out if you want, but it's just me writing text.
Okay. And again, the question is in and out with an animation. We'll talk about that again later. You said a separate video. Can rules or conditions be copied from one scene to another?
Sorry, what was that? I was too busy typing.
Somebody's asking, can rules or conditions be copied from one scene to another?
Yes. There you go.
So it's a right click.
That was from here. Yeah, so you got right click or control copy, and then I went over here, and you can do paste, right click, or control V. So standard Windows shortcuts should work. Do you know one thing I haven't tried to do before? No, you can't do multiple. You just do
No, you
single.
can only do one at a time.
But it does bring all the conditions.
Okay. Here's another one for you. Is there a condition to check for an image change? Or say if you set an image using visual logic, is there a way to check if the image is different once the visual logic has run?
It
There's 2
doesn't
questions there, actually.
matter what's setting it. So you can be set. It can be set by visual logic. It can be set. Visual logic doesn't exactly run like a script. It's constantly checking it. So and the transition logic will just check if the material is different when it comes online versus the one that's online. So it will activate, and it doesn't matter if that comes from a data link source, from Visual Logic, or if it's manually changed. And the just the same as with the text, it's a condition on your right click here, and you just say choose the object material, and you just choose. Obviously, though I don't have one, but let's we got a quad here, so you would just have it based on the check if material and my well-named quad. Obviously, name your objects better than I just have there. But quad 1, check if quad 1 is different or the same. So if it's different, that would then be part of this. If you want, I can open up a project with that working.
We can do that if you want to do that quickly. You do that,
Yep.
I'll dig up another question. Perfect. And quickly, while you're opening this up, I'm going to explain, before we had our cancellations of NAB this year, we were working with a design firm out of the UK. They're actually kind of a global firm. Their name is Austin Elliott. You may also know them as AE Graphics. They have designed our graphics package for us this year for the trade shows. We're now referring to it as the Spring 2020 campaign. Austin Elliott is known for doing sports work, and they are a service provider around the globe, but they also are phenomenal designers, and they put this package together for us to show things off. And we have been very fortunate that they were able to put this together for us. So Simon's going to show you quickly, just back to back here. He's changing the images of 2 people in 2 different full screen pictures. So you can see on the preview, there they are, and there he's showing you the transitions.
There wasn't transition logic, of course. Rather than playing off the side, it would play out and play back in. Instead, though, it plays off to the side and back in. Hope that makes sense. Obviously, just to show you again, in case you missed where I set that up. There you go. You have need to be changed, and check if photo material is different. Photo is the name of the quad that has the image in this scene.
Okay.
Cool. Yep. Hope that
Okay, next
makes
one. I think
sense.
this is a misunderstanding of what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Question is, when you were building your animations, you were having troubles with the masks, having to add workarounds to make the text not blink on and off. Since this is a known issue, will be corrected in future versions of Expression. I don't think this is a software issue as much as the fact that
I
we're
wasn't
showing the
having
difference.
trouble. Uh, yeah, I didn't have trouble. It's part of the training. If I flick back here, it's an option which you can either work around in the same way I did, or you can. So if you go to my no mask fix here, maybe I misnamed it, calling it no mask fix. I should say no mask method. So if you remember, let's just go to the sequence and actually look at it. That would be easier, right? So let's grab this guy and grab this guy. Let's change blah blah blah. So when this one pops off, so what's happening here is the masks are not being rendered. Now you have the option inside of transition logic. So we do both update here, and if we uncheck render objects, animated objects only, that means the whole scene will now get re-rendered. So the downside is because everything gets re-rendered, the text there jumps back in. And I wanted mine to go behind the mask and come back out. So rather than this jump in, and you can use that totally fine. If my text faded on instead, later after this background had been rendered, then using that method would be totally fine. The reason why I didn't use that method was because I wanted to include in part of the training how to be able to use masks and have animations that go behind them and have it get Expression to redraw the masks. So Expression redraws the masks now because it believes because I've checked this, it's only looking for animated objects. So by putting a keyframe on the two masks, even though they don't move, Expression includes them with the text, which means that when you play the completed version, then you have the nice animation. So it really depends on your animation. I purposely built one that requires masks and animates off in that way, so that I could show people how to get Expression to redraw, because inevitably if I didn't teach that way around of doing it, then that would be the first thing that people try.
Cool. And that question came up in a couple of different forms, and I think you've answered it both of them the same way. So I won't repeat the
Okay.
second one. It's basically why you chose to uncheck or check render animated objects. Another question is there a simple way to check for multiple over 50 published elements that does not require 50 plus conditions? I'm going to go out on a limb and say, how would it know which ones you do and don't want to do if you don't create the conditions? But let's see what Simon says.
Off the top of my head, yes. If it depends on how you want to check and what you want to check. Now, there is an option which is script. So if you had something with 50 and you are good with your scripts, then you might be better off doing some kind of loop in your script to check through those different items and check on their status. I don't have an example in my head to build right off now, but that could be included. That would have to be included as part of script training. I would say, yeah, that would go in part of the script webinar perhaps, and that
Okay,
could be
question
kind of
for you.
a hybrid of the two.
On the back-to-back conditions, when you check, can you use a wildcard in there?
Sorry, interrupted. Can you check it on the back-to-back? Can you check it for a wildcard?
Yep.
For
Object materials.
for object materials. You can type in here what you want.
Okay, so it's only looking for that you have to give a particular layer. Okay.
No, you can actually type as well. So in theory, I actually have never, it's actually a really good question because I've actually never tried to do it on an object, and I'm probably going to get shot for not knowing this, but in theory, I guess that would work, but I haven't, I've actually never tried it, and now I want to go try it. So that in theory, any material starting with that and having any ending, it should be checking for them all, right? Oh, now I want to go check. Okay, well that's something to come back to, but
you've given us a good one, Mr. Sanchez. Okay, we'll have to get back to you on that one. We promise we will follow up. Somebody else has gone through the release notes, and by the way, when you install your software, you will find the build notes come up. Those are basically the release notes, and apparently the only thing that was fixed in version 9.5 was a transition logic material could fail to detect two volatile materials as being the same. Do you want to explain what a volatile material is, Simon?
So if you have a material that is volatile, so that would be, what's an easy way for me to show it? Would it be with visual logic? Basically a material that could be coming from script or basically changing at any point. What's a good example? I'm gone blank. I mean, I could just show something through here, I guess.
Where I think you would have that as a volatile texture might be a placeholder, and you're using visual logic or data link to replace the material.
Yeah, so sense? I mean, you can obviously set volatile textures through scripting as well, but an easy example might just be these two. So now it's obviously a fixed material, but I could have an object that was, let's say D. So we could we find the two materials here. So we've got our image 1 material, and we've got our image 2 material. Grab our selector here. In the name of time, I'll just use numbers. And then we need our object faces. Oops. Let's change that to, oops, excuse me. I'm all fingers and thumbs. There we go. So
I believe that answers your volatile question.
So that's technically a volatile texture now. It's changing based on the number there. But yes, that would if that was if you were then saying, has this changed, then transition logic would yes, we would definitely know that it's changed and would react based on that. So that was a long way of saying yes.
Okay. The next one I'm going to ask you is somewhat of a deviant question, but we'll go through it anyways. It's asking if there's a way to export video as an MOV in version 9. We only get the option to export out as AVI. And I'll quickly say this has to do with the fact that you're probably now running the 64-bit edition of software. And if you need to do that, you need to install FFmpeg. And if you go into Expression U, there is a quick tutorial that shows you not only how to set this up, but it also tells you where to get the FFmpeg software so that you can install that on your system, so that you can run that to export the different Windows codecs that you have for MOV files. And this has to do with the fact that Apple does not have a Windows version of QuickTime in a 64-bit edition. Next question comes up, and again, this is really something different. It's not really transition logic, but the question is, what if the material name is the same, but the file path for the material is different? So I would suggest you're thinking about things like player names, where sometimes you do the different player headshots, and you're using a jersey number, and you'll have a home folder, for example, and an away folder. So you could have different folders with the same file ID and the same file name. So that relates to what the material is. It's not so much transition logic, but that's a file trick, and I'll go back and answer that separately. Somebody's asking if there's a way to access this webinar in the future. Yes, I will be recording. It is being recorded, and I will share a link. Again, this one doesn't quite come up, but the question is there a way we can invert masks? And we know that. We'll put that in a separate one. Here we go.
Yeah, there's a couple of, there's a few different solutions for that, yeah.
Yep, and then since we're running out of time here, the last one we'll get to, and I'll answer the rest of these because they're mostly creative. This one is, will the transition logic script be able to access global methods in the future? I'll let you see if you can go through the global script, because
I have not tried to call a script from transition logic to the global script. Since I haven't tried, I assumed it did work, but I'm guessing from their question they've tried and it does not. So that would have to be investigated. I haven't actually tried anything that calls between those two. I assumed it worked, but if they're asking the question, I'm wondering if it doesn't, or what issue. Perhaps they should send their issue in. Rather than asking that question, perhaps they should send the issue they're having, and we can look into it.
I will direct them to you.
No problem.
Okay. We will talk. Kristen's got some great questions about creative content, which we can take offline. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send her to you as well. And I think we need to call it a day. I want to thank everybody for joining in. I will also tell you, if you look in the chat session, I am going to, if I can get back to it here, the videos that you've seen today, there is now a section on the Ross Video website under Expression U, which has all of the transition logic tutorials that you've seen today. That is a new section that's in there, and we will make sure that you guys have access to the recording later so you can see all this follow-up question sequence, and we will send that out in the standard email that comes out here. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and special thanks to Simon for putting all this together for us. And
no worries.
Thanks for joining. And by all means, everybody, do me a favor. Most of you found this on social media. Go out and let us know and let everybody else know what you thought of it. If we were great, wonderful. If we really stunk at this, let us know what we need to change. And I will also use the same channels to put this stuff up on social media. We're going to add some new versions of this, and I'm going to do this really quick. I'm going to stop Simon's screen sharing here, and I'm going to put the poll back up. Hope that's the wrong one. Hold on a second. Let me get the, there you go. So you go ahead and vote, and I added masks because that came up from a couple of people. So make your choices real quick. We will use this to decide what we do next, and we're planning our next one for next week, which will be expression and dashboard.